Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are setting the coordinates for a very specific intersection of time and temperature today.
Okay, I'm ready.
It is the summer of 1995. We are in Los Angeles.
The heat is rising.
Literally and metaphorically, right? I mean, the pavement is baking, the palm trees are swaying, but there's this palpable tension in the air. We are at the absolute zenith of the G-funk era.
The absolute peak.
This is a moment where the soundscape of the West Coast has completely, taken over popular culture. Dr. Dre has already reshaped the entire sonic landscape of the world with The Chronic.
Oh, yeah.
Snoop Dogg is arguably the most famous person on the planet at this specific moment.
He really was. But, the tectonic plates are shifting again. Because while Long Beach and Compton had been sucking up all the oxygen in the room for the last 3 years, really since the explosion of NWA and then, of course, Death Row, there was a new energy bubbling up.
A different energy.
Yeah, from a different zip code.
Inglewood. And today our mission is to conduct a forensic examination of the artifact that put Inglewood on the map in a way it hadn't been before.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at the self-titled debut album, Mack 10, released June 20, 1995.
This is such a pivotal record, and, it's easy to overlook it in the grand scheme of things.
I think people do.
They do. They just see it as another West Coast album from that, glut of releases in the mid-90s. But when you dig into the liner notes, which we are going to do extensively today, you realize this is actually the moment the West Coast sound went global.
And when you say global, you don't just mean sales figures.
No, I don't mean it just sold well overseas. I mean the DNA of the music itself, the production, it was becoming international.
Okay, that is the big insight we need to tease right now. We are going to reveal how the ultimate Los Angeles gangsta rap album, a record that sounds like hydraulics and sunshine and grit.
It just sounds like L.A.
It does. But it was actually crafted by a team of producers from, well, let's just say, not South Central.
It is, and I stand by this. It's the most surprising detail in 90s hip-hop history, in my opinion.
Wow.
It completely changes how you hear the record once you know.
But before we get to the who, we have to look at the what and the where. We need to profile the man himself, Didrik Demon Rollison.
Better known to the world as Mack 10.
Born August 9, 1971. An Inglewood native through and through. Now, to understand Mack 10's arrival in 1995, you have to understand the void he was filling.
That's the key. The context is everything.
Yeah.
The West Coast scene was dominated by two very specific archetypes at that time.
Right. What were they?
Well, first you had the pimp persona, smooth, laid-back, melodic. That was the Snoop Dogg and Warren G lane.
The G-funk crooner, almost.
Exactly. And then on the other end, you had the political revolutionary, the early Ice Cube, or someone like Paris from the Bay Area, the conscious, angry voice.
Okay, so Mack 10 was neither of those.
Not even close. He introduced what we call the Inglewood swinger persona. It was high energy, it was aggressive, it wasn't about being smooth, it was about being loud.
I like that distinction.
He brought this hustler spirit that felt grittier, chunkier. It was the difference between, sipping gin and juice and chugging a 40-ounce malt liquor.
He didn't rap with that melodic flow Snoop had. He famously had that sneer. He barked at you.
He did. And that was a strategic choice. We have to remember, Mack 10 wasn't just some guy passing out mixtapes at the Slauson swap meet hoping to get noticed.
No, this was a calculated move.
It was. He was handpicked. This was a corporate maneuver as much as it was an artistic one. He was the flagship product for the next phase of Ice Cube's career.
Let's talk about that context. The album drops on Priority Records.
The powerhouse. Priority Records in the 90s was effectively what Motown was in the 60s, at least for independent hip-hop on the West Coast.
That's a huge comparison.
But it's true. They had the machine. If you were on Priority, you had distribution, you had marketing, and you had the streets locked down.
And the machine worked. The stats on this debut are staggering for a new artist. It hits number 33 in the Billboard 200, which is great. But the real story is where it landed on the R&B hip-hop chart.
It rocketed to number 2. Number 2 on the U.S. top R&B hip-hop albums chart.
And that number 2 spot is the tell, right?
That's the one. That means the streets were buying it, the core audience showed up immediately and in massive numbers.
And the RIA's certification backs that up completely. The album's released in June.
Certified gold by September 12th.
That is incredible velocity, moving 500,000 units in essentially one summer.
That means you are the soundtrack of that summer, period. You are blasting out of every Jeep Wrangler and 64 Impala from Crenshaw all the way up to Oakland. It was inescapable in the summer of '95.
But it wasn't critically perfect, was it? There was a shadow, a very large shadow, hanging over the project.
The shadow of the mentor. You cannot debut under Ice Cube's wing without being compared to Ice Cube. It's impossible.
And critics picked up on that right away.
Immediately. They clocked that Mack 10 had Cube's sneer and his aggression. There were reviews, I think it was the Chicago Tribune, that pointed out while he had the funk, he lacked Cube's vitality.
Meaning the political edge. The social commentary.
Precisely. Cube was known as the Black CNN, right? He was reporting on the reasons why the hood was the way it was. Mack 10, by contrast, was viewed more as a participant.
A reporter on the ground, not an anchor in the studio.
Perfect analogy. He wasn't analyzing the violence or the socioeconomic conditions. He was living the pathos of it. He was reporting from the trenches, but without the editorial commentary.
Which brings us to the architect of this whole operation. We can't talk about Mack 10 without doing a deep dive on where Ice Cube was mentally and professionally in 1995.
This is the mogul shift. If you track Cube's career, it is just a masterclass in evolution.
It really is. Born O'Shea Jackson, June 15th, 1969. He starts way back before most people even know with a group called CIA with his neighbor Sir Jenks.
This is pre-NWA. We're talking mid-'80s.
What does their sound like?
They were doing like Beastie Boys style rap, fun party stuff. But obviously he explodes onto the scene with NWA. He writes the hits. I mean, straight out of Compton, express yourself, dope man. Cube's pen was behind the vast majority of that classic material.
But then comes the split.
The most famous and probably most important breakup in hip-hop history. He leaves over financial disputes. He felt, and history proved incorrect, that he was not being compensated fairly by Jerry Heller and Ruthless Records.
And this leads to a fascinating production footnote that impacts the entire rest of his career.
Right, the ruthless contract dispute. So when Cube left, he initially wanted Dr. Dre to produce his solo album. They were still cool personally at that point.
Of course, why wouldn't they be?
But Eazy-E, who controlled Ruthless, contractually rejected that. He essentially blocked Dre from working with Cube. It was a power move.
Which forced Cube to pivot, not just creatively, but geographically.
It did. A huge pivot. He went to New York. He teamed up with the Bomb Squad, Public Enemy's production team, for America's Most Wanted in 1990.
Which was, I think, a happy accident, because that album is an absolute masterpiece.
It's a classic. It blended that noisy, chaotic, dense East Coast production with that raw West Coast aggression. It changed everything. Then you get Death Certificate in 1991.
Where he basically becomes the prophet, predicting the LA riots with chilling accuracy.
Exactly. Then The Predator in 1992, which is his commercial peak, debuting at #1, a huge, huge record.
And then, importantly for our story today, Lethal Injection in 1993.
And that's where we see the full transition to G-Funk. He starts moving away from the noisy Bomb Squad sound and fully embracing the melodic P-Funk-inspired sound that Dre had just, perfected and popularized.
So by 1995, for this Mack 10 album, where is Cube? What's his mindset?
He is transitioning into the Don Mega. That's the persona he's building. He's no longer just the rapper, he's the CEO. He is building the lynch mob empire.
And Mack 10, the album, is the first brick in that new empire.
The very first. Cube is the executive producer here. He's the lead producer on key tracks. He's a writer. He is a featured artist. He is essentially saying to the entire industry, I don't just make hits for myself anymore. I can manufacture stars.
He's expanding the franchise.
Exactly. And a huge part of that expansion involved keeping it in the family. And I mean that almost literally. We need to introduce the supporting cast here because this album feels like a family reunion.
Specifically WC and Crazy Toones.
Yes, this is the bedrock of what would eventually become West Side Connection.
Let's start with WC. Dub C.
WC, real name William Calhoun Jr., also known as Dub. By 1995, WC was already a West Coast legend. He wasn't some new artist Cube found.
He had a deep, deep history.
A very deep history. He started way back. Originally, he was a beatboxer for a group called The Organization, but his first major move was forming the group Low Profile with DJ Aladdin in 1988.
Low Profile is a name that true heads know.
Absolutely. They released an album called We're In This Together on Priority Records, same label. It didn't blow up commercially, but it established WC as a premier lyricist. He was known for that intricate, choppy, super technical flow.
And the same walk.
We cannot forget the C-Walk, the Crip Walk. WC popularized that footwork on a global scale through his videos. It became synonymous with West Coast culture.
So after Low Profile, he forms another group.
He does. WC and the Mad Circle.
And that group had a very interesting and, in hindsight, very famous roster.
It did. It was WC, Big G, Coolio, yes, that Coolio, before he went to Banksta's Paradise, and WC's younger brother, the one and only Crazy Toones.
Wow.
Their 1991 album, Ain't a Damn Thing Changed, is a cult classic, a must-listen for anyone who loves this era.
Which brings us to the heartbeat of the operation, Crazy Toones.
Lamar Dupree Calhoun, born November 18, 1971. He was WC's younger brother and, crucially, Ice Cube's official DJ. He was a core member of the Lynch Mob, the Mad Circle, and, of course, eventually West Side Connection.
It is so tragic that we lost him.
It really is. He passed away in January 2017, a massive loss for the culture, because he was a true student of the game, a real crate digger.
And on this Mack 10 album, he is vital.
Absolutely. He produced the track, Here Comes the G. Having WC and Crazy Toones involved gave the whole project this dense, authentic texture. These guys all grew up in the same neighborhoods in South Central. They knew each other's rhythms.
So you have the mentor, who's Ice Cube, you have the protege, Mack 10, and you have the extended family, WC and Toones. It feels incredibly local. It feels like a neighborhood project.
It creates a specific type of chemistry that you just can't manufacture. When you hear them on a track together, you believe they are friends. You believe they came from the same block.
Which makes the next revelation so utterly mind-bending. Because while the vocalists were all from the neighborhood, the sound, well, let's get into the production.
This is the part of the story I love. This is the Danish connection.
Okay, so picture this. You are listening to a track like West Side Slaughterhouse. It is aggressive. It is territorial. It sounds like the darkest alley in Inglewood at 2 in the morning.
It sounds like it was made in a smoky basement studio in South Central.
And
yet, the beat was made by 4 guys from Denmark.
Denmark. As in Scandinavia, Europe. It's unbelievable.
Specifically, a production team called Madness for Real. The members were Jesper Dahl, Lasse Bavgaard, Nicholas Kvaran, and Rasmus Berg. They were also part of a very popular Danish hip-hop group called Den Gale Pose.
How on earth does a demo tape from Copenhagen end up in Ice Cube's hands in Los Angeles in 1995?
It's one of those truth is stranger than fiction stories. I mean, these guys were huge fans of the West Coast sound. They were students. They studied the gfunk science.
They did their homework.
They absolutely did. And they actually traveled to Los Angeles, basically hustled their way into the right studios, and managed to get their beats heard by the Lynch Mob camp.
And Cube liked what he heard.
He loved it. He must have realized that these guys had studied the G-Funk formula so perfectly that they could replicate it and in some ways enhance it, maybe even better than some of the locals could.
So they produced West Side Slaughterhouse.
They did, which is, as you said, arguably the hardest, most quintessentially gangsta track on the entire album.
It's incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, you literally have Mack 10 shouting out Inglewood over drums, programmed by guys named Jesper and Lasse.
And it wasn't just them. There was another producer involved from Denmark named Dr. Jam.
Dr. Jam. Okay, who is he?
His real name is Henrik Milling, another Dane. He was a Danish R&B and rap producer who came to Los Angeles in that era and managed to work with some huge names. We're talking Ice Cube, Eazy-E, Johnny Gill. He was in the mix.
And what did he do on the Mack 10 album?
He produced the track Chicken Hawk.
So you have Henrik Milling, a Danish guy, producing a track called Chicken Hawk for Mack 10. That is just wild to me.
And Henrik Milling is a fascinating character. After his stint in LA, living the hip-hop dream, he actually returned to Denmark and became a very famous, very beloved radio host on Danish national radio P3.
That's an incredible career trajectory.
Isn't it? From producing gangster rap in LA to being a national radio personality in Denmark?
It really challenges our perception of authenticity in hip-hop, doesn't it?
It completely shatters it.
We obsess over where an artist is from, what street they grew up on, but the sonic backdrop, that can be imported.
It proves that G-Funk is a musical language. It has rules. It has grammar, heavy bass lines, those high-pitched worm synths, a specific tempo, usually around 90 to 95 BPM.
The formula.
The formula. And if you learn the language and the grammar of that music, you can speak it, regardless of whether you're from Compton or Copenhagen.
It really speaks to the globalization of the sound. Even in 1995, before the internet was, what it is today, the G-Funk sound had traveled so far that producers in Denmark were able to recreate it, bring it back to LA, and have it stamped with the ultimate seal of approval by Ice Cube.
And we should mention Solid Productions as well. That was another entity listed in the credits that included Henrik Milling, Nicholas Kvaran, and Rasmus Berg. There was a lot of overlap in these Danish production teams. They were a tight-knit unit that came to LA and made a huge impact.
Now, to be fair, not every track came from overseas. We have to give love to the home team as well. Let's talk about the 88X unit.
Right. McCall K. Simmons and Victor Nathan Taylor. These guys were LA-based, and they produced On Them Things, and the title track, Mack 10's the name.
And On Them Things is the polar opposite of West Side Slaughterhouse.
Completely. If Slaughterhouse is Saturday night, On Them Things is Sunday afternoon, it's laid back, it's cruising music, and it relies heavily on interpolation.
Let's pause and define that term for a second. Interpolation versus a sample.
Good call. So a sample is when you take a piece of the actual original recording of an old song and you loop the audio. And interpolation is when you replay the melody or the bass line using your own instruments in the studio.
So it sounds similar, but it's a brand new recording.
Exactly. It gives it a cleaner, more modern sound, and importantly, it also helps with copyright clearance. It's often cheaper and easier because you don't have to clear the master recording from the record label, just the publishing rights from the songwriter.
And on Them Things, they are interpolating an absolute monster.
Mary Jane by Rick James. You literally cannot go wrong with a Rick James bass line in 1995. It's a cheat code.
It is. It triggers an instant Pavlovian response in the listener.
Yeah.
It makes you feel good. It captures that feeling of sitting in a lowrider, hitting the switches, sun on your face. It's purely atmospheric.
It's the perfect G-funk vibe.
Before we go track by track, there is one more affiliate we need to introduce who makes a key appearance on the album. K-Dee.
K-Dee. That's right. Featured on the track, H-O-E-K.
Spelled out.
Spelled out, of course. His real name is Daryl L. Johnson. He also went by aliases like Kid Disaster or D-Rock D.
Who was he in the context of the lynch mob?
He was a longtime affiliate, South Central based, been around the camp for a while, but his style was very different from Mack 10's. Where Mack 10 was aggressive, loud, and barking, K-Dee brought a smoother, more pimpish style. He had a slicker, softer delivery. He was more in that Tour-Hort lane of storytelling.
It provided a nice contrast there.
It did. It broke up the texture of the album. You need that. If you have 60 minutes of just aggressive shouting, it can get tiring for the listener. K-Dee came in and smoothed it out for a minute.
Okay, let's get into the music.
Yeah.
We have set the stage. We know the players. Now let's drop the needle. We have to start with the lead single, Faux Life.
Released April 29th, 1995. Produced by Ice Cube himself. This was the declaration. This was the mission statement.
The title is a double entendre, right?
Yep.
Faux, F-O-E, meaning enemy, but it's also phonetic for, as in for life.
Exactly. It's a statement of commitment to the gang lifestyle, no ambiguity. But what really, really sold this song was the video.
The video was huge.
If you were watching The Box, MTV Jams, or Bet Rap City in the summer of '95, this video was on constant, heavy rotation.
It was a cinematic universe in 3.5 minutes.
It was. It was a direct spoof of the opening scene of the movie Menace the Second Society, which was massive at the time. They go in and they're knocking off a rim shop. Then you see Mack 10 fighting a case in court. It's a whole narrative.
And the getaway scene is iconic.
High drama. It's so over the top. Mack 10 is running from the cops on a rooftop. He jumps from the roof of a city building.
A very, very unrealistic jump, we should add.
Highly questionable physics. It's like a 10-story drop onto another building. But he lands. And who is behind the wheel of the getaway car waiting for him?
The Don Mega himself. Ice Cube makes the cameo as the driver.
Exactly. And that visual was worth $1 million of marketing. Seeing Cube driving the car told every skeptical fan, he's with me, he's official, I am co-signing this man to the point where I am driving the getaway car for him.
It's the ultimate endorsement in that world.
It is.
And we have to talk about the car itself. That green, customized Cadillac coupe.
That is the Mack 10 car. It's the same car featured on the album cover.
Huh.
That green lowrider became a character in the Mack 10 mythology. It was his Batmobile.
And the song had legs. It wasn't just a hit that summer. It was later used in the 1997 film Anaconda,
which, not coincidentally, starred Ice Cube. The synergy between the film world and the music world in Cube's empire was starting to click into place.
Okay, moving on to On Them Things. We mentioned the 88X unit production and the Rick James interpolation.
This track is essential. If Faux Life was the aggressive introduction, the knock on the door On Them Things was the lifestyle anthem. This is what you played when you weren't trying to scare anyone, you were just trying to look good.
It's the cruising song.
It's the ultimate cruising song. It's the soundtrack for hitting the switches on Crenshaw on a Sunday.
Now, we arrive at what I think is a historically significant moment on the album. Track 3, West Side Slaughterhouse.
This is a massive track.
Yeah.
Features WC and Ice Cube. Produced by Madness for Real, our friends from Denmark.
Why is this one so important in the grand timeline of West Coast hip-hop?
Because this track effectively birthed the supergroup West Side Connection. Before the Bow Down album came out in 1996, this was the genesis. This track established the Trinity, Mack 10, WC, and Ice Cube.
You can hear the formation of the group happening in real time right here.
You absolutely can. They're trading verses. The chemistry is just electric. It's locked in. It's aggressive. It's territorial. And you have to remember the context. At this time, the East Coast, West Coast beef was really starting to simmer.
It was heating up. Tupac was in jail. Suge Knight was making moves at the Source Awards.
And this track was a line in the sand. They were establishing territory. When you hear them together, you realize how perfectly they balance each other out.
Break that down.
You have Cube, who is the authority, the general. You have WC, who is the lyrical technician with the intricate rhymes and that signature flow. And then you have Mack 10, who is the raw energy, the hype man, who can also really, really rap. It's a perfect combination.
And the beat from Madness for Real is just punishing.
It's incredible that it came from Denmark. It's a testament to their skill.
Let's look at Here Comes the G.
Ah, yeah. Produced by the late, great, crazy Toones. This one uses a beautiful sample from Remind Me by Patrice Rushen.
That is such a smooth sample, a classic.
It is, and it's a smart choice. It softens the edges of the album just enough. It shows that Mack 10 could handle a groove, not just a hard, aggressive beat. It demonstrated his versatility.
And then there's 10 Million Ways.
Which is interesting because it samples AJ Scratch by Curtis Blow.
Curtis Blow. That is going way back to the early 80s.
It's paying homage to the old school. It's a nod to the breakbeat era of New York, updated for the gangster rap audience of 90s LA. It shows that these guys, especially producers like Cube and Crazy Toones, were students of the entire genre. They knew their history.
Finally, we have to talk about the funk, the P-Funk, specifically on tracks like Armed and Dangerous and Mosey Wozy.
This is where the G-Funk blueprint is most visible and most pure. Armed and Dangerous uses samples from Devotion by Earth, Wind and Fire, and D-Flashlight by Parliament.
Two of the biggest funk bands of all time on one track. Flashlight has that iconic bass synthesizer line.
The Bernie Worrell bass line. That sound is West Coast hip-hop in the 90s. By using that, Mack 10 is placing himself directly in a lineage. He is saying, I am the rightful inheritor of this funk tradition.
And Mosey Wozy?
That also interpolates Devotion by Earth, Wind and Fire. It shows the heavy, heavy reliance on P-Funk and 70s soul. That was the formula. You take the grit and the reality of street life and you layer it over the most infectious, melodic, beautiful funk from the 70s.
It creates that dissonance, that tension that makes G-Funk so compelling.
That is the magic formula right there. If the music was as dark and gritty as the lyrics, it would be unlistenable. It would just be horrorcore.
Right.
And if the lyrics were as happy and sunny as the music, it would be pop music. The tension between the sweet, soulful music and the harsh reality of the lyrics is what made it art.
So let's pull back. We look back at this album, released almost 30 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
What is the legacy? What did it achieve?
The legacy is twofold, I think. First, and most obviously, it established Mack 10 as a commercially viable solo artist. He proved he wasn't just going to be Cube's sidekick or hype man. He moved units, he went gold, he had legitimate hits.
He proved he could carry an album.
He did. And second,
it set the table for West Side Connection.
That's the other huge piece. Without West Side Slaughterhouse and the commercial success of this album, I don't know if Priority Records would have cut the check for the Bow Down album a year later. This album proved the math worked. The formula was a success.
It also validated Ice Cube as an executive, as a mogul.
A huge validation. It proved he could build an empire, not just a solo career.
And personally, I think the legacy is also in that globalization we discussed earlier. It's a snapshot of a very specific moment in time, the height of Priority Records, the absolute dominance of the West Coast sound, and the completely fascinating, mind-boggling fact that Danish producers were crafting the beats for Inglewood's finest.
That is the part that sticks with me the most. The idea that in 1995, hip-hop had already crossed the Atlantic, been digested, analyzed, and sent back to Los Angeles in a form that was authentic enough to drive a gold-selling album.
It says so much.
It says a lot about the universal language of G-Funk. It became a global phenomenon, not just in consumption, but in creation.
It really does. It's a powerful reminder that music has no borders, even when it's repping a specific neighborhood like Inglewood as hard as possible.
Well said. Very well said.
That's going to do it for our deep dive into Mack 10's self-titled debut. It's a classic, essential piece of 90s hip-hop history that absolutely deserves its flowers. We hope you view those liner notes a little differently next time you stream this album.
Always check the credits. You never know who you'll find in there.
Exactly. And we will leave you with this final thought to chew on. If a group of producers from Denmark could so perfectly capture the sound of Inglewood in 1995, where else is the next great regional hip-hop sound being incubated right now? It might not be where you think. Thanks for listening.
Keep digging.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.